Why do you say that our global health is in crisis because of the soil? What's wrong with the soil?
So that's a big question. Or my answer to it is a big answer. We have to put it in the context of the evolution of agriculture. And we went from that what we called agriculture. We don't have a relationship anymore with agriculture. It got bastardized after the Second World War into agribusiness. So we lost our human interaction, our cultural orientation to the growing of food, and it became a business. So I don't mind compromising on my neighbor if I'm going to make more profit. And then it got bastardized even further in the 90s, where we have now agri-power. And there are 5 multinational companies who predominantly own the food sector. They own the seed, they own the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, nematicides, and they own the fertilizer. So they've pretty much captured globally this agricultural sector. And it was through this evolution that our orientation to the soil changed. We also, as a species, went through a mindset shift where we went from relating things, we went from relating to things as an organism, we now relate to them as a machine. And the soil's function was minimal. It was there to hold the plant upright, and we gave all the fertilizer, or we give all the fertilizer to the plant to enable it to grow. The biological side of the soil has been fundamentally compromised. The life aspect of the soil has been compromised. And therefore our food has been compromised. Because you beget life from life, not from the mineral.
So what do you mean when you say that the life aspect of the soil has been compromised? Can you explain that? What happened? What happened to the soil?
It literally does. Literally does. And again, part of the whole context is that we function within the 4 kingdoms of nature. And nature has a physical kingdom, mineral, there's a shape, there's a form, there's a structure, but there's no life in it. That physical matter. And then the physical matter gets lifted into life, and it's represented by the plant kingdom. There's a shape, there's a form, there's a structure, and within that shape, form, structure, there's an acknowledged element called life. Then it gets lifted even further, and it's shape, form, structure, life. But now this being has the capacity to be awake and asleep, and to dream. And that kingdom is called the animal kingdom. The plant, in a sense, doesn't dream like an animal can dream. And then the 4th kingdom is the human kingdom. Shape, form, structure, life, awake, asleep, dreaming. But what sets us apart from the animal kingdom is that we're able to have a conversation. We're able, through our I, and I mean a capital I, not your lower ego, your higher self, we can have meaningful conversations. And that's the kind of context in which we're working agriculturally. We need to be honoring and respecting and developing all 4 of those kingdoms. And they all one. They don't live in isolation. And modern man suffers from establishing the relationship with the other 3 kingdoms. When you ask a soul, where's nature? Invariably, they point outside and say, it's over there. Instead of saying, it lives in me. I have a skeleton, I have nails, I have the eye. These are very physical. Then we have our life body. So when we pass over to the other side, it's your life body that leaves your physical body. And then you're considered to be dead. And we have this awake, asleep, dreamlike quality. And we have our ego.
So what you're saying is that because we are killing the soil, our global health is in crisis. Normally, normally I would think that, or most people would think that, our global health is in crisis because of processed foods. But you're saying, no, it's not just the processing of the food, it's the processing of the soil and the processing of the plant. That's...
Absolutely. The foundation is the soil. We make it worse by growing compromised food in compromised soils, and then we take it a step further and do all the processing, the value adding, and those additives that we add to the food. Those are, we've become again it's another expression of our materialistic viewpoint. We don't want to stand in the kitchen and peel vegetables. Old world stuff. Let me just go to the supermarket, buy a ready-made meal, put it in the microwave, kill it even more dead. That's the way that we've been currently brought up to.
Why is the soil compromised and why is the food compromised?
So again, I'm going to lean towards acknowledging the biological side of the soil. All soils have a trilogy in terms of their components. They have a mineral component, they have a chemical component, and they have a biological component. And it's the biological component that, in a sense, is the gel between the chemical and the mineral. So if you're taking out that biological side, you're landing up with minerals and chemicals. No life. So from a biodynamic point of view, from an anthroposophical point of view, when we talk about nutrition, yes, of course, we have to honor and respect and recognize there's minerals, multivitamins, essential elements, the trace elements. There's all this terminology. But essentially what we're doing when we eat is we're eating the forces that were emanated out of the cosmos into the manifestation of what we're eating. A carrot, a beetroot, a lettuce, whatever it might be. Those, what we call vegetables or fruits, they have the capacity to capture those living forces that emanated out of the cosmos. They do that to their best ability when they're in a living environment. They're very compromised when they're growing in a soilless situation.
And the mechanism through which that happens, the way I understand it, is through microorganisms. Is that correct?
That's the key. That's the one thing that very few of us are even aware of. This absolute dependence on processes that are realized, manifest, and attributed to microorganisms, microbiology. They're the real players in the world.
Okay, yeah. So can you give us some examples of what the role of what some of, I know that there's possibly trillions, but give us examples of the role that microorganisms play in our food, in the context of soil and food.
So you were mentioning trillions. When we passed through our education system, invariably we were all told about cells and how many cells there are. There's like Google amounts of cells, but we're 10 times more microbial than cellular. The average adult holds about 1.5 kilos of microbes in their gut. Those are little creatures that you can't even see. They're too small to, in a teaspoon, there are 10 billion of them in a teaspoon of healthy soil. So we're going beyond numbers here. We're leaning towards acknowledging the world of the supersensible. It's outside of our physical senses. That's what's happening with the microbes. So my professor back in 82, when I was doing the biodynamic agriculture, he said we've got two teachers. One is the forest and one is your body. So if you've got a question, ask the forest or ask your body. So I'm going to utilize your question and say, what happens in the forest from a microbial point of view? How do they influence that activity? So typically, spring comes along, there's new buds, there's new leaf, the leaves mature, photosynthesis, those life processes happen. Comes autumn, comes winter, those leaves fall to the floor of the forest. Then they're subject to the influence of microbes. And those microbes decompose, humify, and mineralize to enable those leaves to feed the next generation of leaves. And so those life processes are a continuum, and their expression is shrouded in the world of microbiology. If you ask yourself, how in my own body are those microbes active? Case in point, I had an apple for breakfast. So my digestion started visually. It then gets first steps when I'm masticating in my mouth with the saliva, goes to the stomach, goes through towards my gut. And in my gut are these microbes, and they then assimilate that apple into my body. That's a huge influence. I don't have apples running around here. I have those life forces that were trapped in that apple, plus all those vitamins, essential elements. So that's the influence the microbes play in our life.
So what you're saying is that the microbes convert the food into a form that our body can use.
Yeah.
That's one of their functions, because
Yeah.
the way that I understand it is that there's a lot of other functions as well.
Properly.
I want to ask you about something. While I was doing my research for for our conversation, I was actually learning about how that microbes play a very similar role in the soil. So they convert minerals from the soil into a form that the plants can take up. So is it that, and what I understand now from modern agriculture is that with the use of genetically modified seed and the pesticides and the herbicides, it's actually killing off these microbes in the soil.
Yeah.
But
that's why we went. Sorry, that it is.
Yeah. So I have a question there. But then when you look at food that is grown with conventionally, it often looks brighter, bigger. Like you see strawberries, they're massive. Why is that happening if the food is able to take up less from the soil? So why are they growing like that?
So they're, in a sense, pumping nutrients into the plant. So there was a famous man who kind of was at the absolute forefront of the shift that happened in our consciousness. He was a German, Baron Justus von Liebig. And in about 1850, he did 2 tests in his laboratory. One is that he ashed plants, so subject the plants to fire, and in the ash he determined that there's nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, N, P, and K. And out of that he deduced that actually for every plant then to manifest itself, it needs access to N, P, and K. The other test that he did is in the context of humus. And he found humus is not soluble in water. So he deduced from that, if it's not soluble in water, it can't be feeding the plant. And that was the fundamental shift from our acknowledgement linked to the Industrial Revolution, where we viewed things as organisms. We're now starting to say, hey, wow, no, this is a very materialistic, scientific, measurable, determinable approach. And it's through the context of the evolution that we've been through since 1850, where we get to where we are now. So predominantly, to try directly to answer your question, if we're adding in the NPs and Ks to the chemical and mineral component of the soil through a water medium, the plant has no choice. It's going to assimilate those NPs and K, and it blows them up like this. Look what's happening to modern man, how subject we are to obesity. We're being blown up by those, in a sense, by the lack of nutrients. But it's the detail in modern food that's doing it to us.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you found today's episode insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Subscribing helps a new podcast like ours immensely. And until next time, don't be a sheep, keep questioning, stay curious, and never stop exploring the extraordinary. Stay tuned for part 2, where we delve deeper into this topic.